All right. Good evening. I'm hearing myself. We'll go ahead and get started with this meeting. It is 5:35 p.m. on February 12th, 2025. We'll go ahead and get started with a roll call. So Board Member Diaz.
Present.
Board Member Finlay here. Board Member Holguin.
Here.
Board Member Hasso.
Here.
Board Member Reyes.
Here.
Excellent. All right, we'll go ahead and go with our flag salute. And Mr. Kevin Morris, could I have you do that? Excellent, thank you. All right, we'll now move on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
All right, I heard a motion by Mr. Reyes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Diaz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, do we have any requests to address the board? None, thank you very much. All right, we can then move on to item number 6, which is the California Dashboard December 2024 release.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, everybody, for coming here tonight. The California School Dashboard is more than just a collection of numbers. It is a critical tool that informs the work that we do every single day to support students' learning and overall experiences in our schools. These data points are not just measurements. They guide our conversation, shape our actions, and help us ensure that every student in the Duarte Unified School District receives the support and opportunities they need to thrive. So leading our discussion this evening will be Dr. Kelly Lawson, our Senior Director of Educational Services, who will walk us through some key insights from the dashboard. And also joining us tonight are the dedicated leaders of each of our schools, educators who regularly use these data and drive decisions and continually improve the learning environments for our students. I encourage us all to approach this discussion with curiosity, reflection, and a shared commitment to using these insights to strengthen our schools and the futures of the students we serve. And at this time, Dr. Lawson, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to give you a little outline of how this night will go. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about the school dashboard, some facts about what it is, how we use the information, what information is included, just to make sure we're all on the same page with our understanding of what the dashboard is. And then I'm going to do an overview of the district's data. This is all of our students in the Duarte Unified School Districts. I will talk a little bit about our subgroups, as well as some of our subgroups that need a little more support. I'll go over a little bit some of the strategies that we are using, and then we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. The site administrators are here tonight, and they are here to answer any questions as it relates to their data and particular strategies and techniques that they're using at their school site. In front of you, you should have a very nice binder, a little book here. It has all the information. It has all the data. It has the district's data. It's pretty thick. I heard someone say, this is thick. It is pretty thick. We wanted to give you a lot of information. So it has the information about the district's data, as well as each school site's information. And then behind each school site, at the very last page, there are strategies and goals that the school sites have listed in their single plan for student achievement that helps them meet the targets and help us improve our data on the dashboard. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. As Dr. Hillman shared a little bit about what the dashboard is, it gives us meaningful information about how we're progressing as a district, as well as how we are progressing as a school, as our school sites. It informs our decisions so we can make data-driven decisions on how to improve student achievement. it gives us data on different indicators. So it's not just test scores. I think that that's important to note because it also gives us information about attendance, about our graduation rate, college and career readiness. Those are some other indicators. So what I want you to do as we go into the study session tonight is I really want you to have this holistic view of what it means to achieve as a district. It's not just one measure that we're looking at. There are multiple measures that we address every day on the school sites, multiple measures that we address at the district level, and all of those come together to determine how well we're progressing and it informs our decision and helps us to know what we need to do in order to continue growing and making sure we're meeting the needs of all students in our district, okay? So some things that you'll see on there on this dashboard, this tool, it gives us, it presents the status levels from very high to very low. It also gives us information about change, and I think that's important because it's not just about 1 year of information. We want to look at our students and determine how well did they do last year, how did they do the year before that, so we can determine are we progressing where we need to make adjustments. And then it gives us information on our various student groups, and it is released annually every year in December. So we're looking at information from the spring, because the information that we have on our dashboard, some of the academic data comes from our CASP assessment that was in the spring. And so that was from December of, spring of 24. So this is December 2024 data, okay? So how do we use it? We use it to evaluate our progress on the district's LCAP. In our LCAP, we have various goals and priorities that are indicated, that are listed in our LCAP, and we use this dashboard because a lot of our measures are directly related to the LCAP. It informs the single plan for student achievement at the school sites, which is what the schools develop to determine how they're going to meet the needs of all students. And the way I see this, like the dashboard contains all the measures. Schools do a SIPSA, Single Plan for Student Achievement. The district does a LCAP, which is a big SIPSA for the district. And all of it goes together to help us determine our progress. Another thing that the dashboard allows us to do is focus on equity, because we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of every student, not just one group of student. We want to make sure all of our subgroups are making progress. And if they're not, we need to then identify what are the needs, what curriculum needs do we have, what needs do we have in terms of instruction, what assessment data do we have, what benchmark data do we have, our facilities as well as professional development. All this information is something that's available in our dashboard, and we do use it to help us with our decision making. So we are looking at the 2024 California dashboard information, and at the time when our data was attained, we had 2,980 students. 53.5% of our students are socially, economically disadvantaged. We are 21% English learners, and 0.8% are foster youth, okay? So what does the dashboard include? There are state indicators, which will focus on the academic indicators, which are English, language arts, mathematics. We also have science data. We will look at the progress of our English language learners, as well as graduation rate, the suspension rate, college and career readiness, and then chronic absenteeism. All that information, those are state indicators that we'll look at. And then there are the local indicators. And on those local indicators, they're listed here, looking at basic services, our implementation of state and academic standards, parent and family engagement, school climate, access to a broad course of study, and then there's some specific ones for the county level, okay? And so these state indicators as well as these local indicators give us a well-rounded view of our students and a well-rounded view of the district and what we need to do. Yes.
Is it okay to ask questions while you're going, or would you prefer us to hold them?
So what I would prefer, if you would hold me, if you want to write the notes on there, but if it's a burning question and you want me to stop, I have no problem, because this is a study session, so we can make it whatever we need it to be.
It is a smoldering, not a burning thing, so I can wait.
If it's burning, just say it's burning. You need to get your question. I'm totally okay with that. So if you want to, you can go ahead. It's up to you.
It was just really quickly, under the local indicators here, it talks about different priority levels. Are those priority levels that we set, or are those set by somebody?
These are the priority levels that are in the LCAP.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the student groups that we'll look at, you see the groups listed there, as well as the program that these students are in. And I think that when you think about the dashboard, this to me is probably one of the most important pieces to note, because we want to make sure that we are providing equitable access for every student. And we know that students come in at different levels. We know there are different factors that may support or hinder a student's ability to be successful in school. And so as a public institution, we have to be aware of what the needs of all of the students are, and we need to be able to track and monitor those students. And we cannot just rest on one particular group of students being successful, because if one group is failing, we need to make sure their needs are being met, as well as the highest achieving to the lowest achieving students. So this subgroup data is very key. The way information is reported, we get reports if you have at least 30 students in a group. Reporting for students between 11 and 29, we do not get a performance data for. We don't get performance information. We do get status and change levels, but we do not get the performance information. And then there's also reporting on our long-term English learners, which is a new group. It's not a new group to our school sites, but new to the dashboard this year. And these are English learners that have not been reclassified as fluent English proficient students, and they've been in our schools for at least 7 years. And so we do have data that's been disaggregated for that group of students to see how they are achieving. And so when we get to look at our LP data, which is our English Learner Performance Indicators, it has data for our English learners as well as our long-term English learners. Now, there is an exception to the rule of 30 for a group that has reporting for fewer than less than 11 students. Our foster youth and homeless and our LTELs, we will receive a score for them if they have at least 15 students from the current year and the prior year. So just know that is the exception to the 30 rule. So for each measure you'll see, we have current year data, and then you have the current year minus the prior year, which is the change. And this is key, because when we get into our data on the future pages, you'll see indicators that say maintain, declined, increase. That information is important because we want to kind of function from a value-added model. We want our students to come into our schools, and we want to be able to move them from where they are. And the best way to see that is through their change, right? So we want to see positive growth every year for students, because it's not just a score. These are students, this is their achievement, and we want to make sure that we're moving them along. So as I stated earlier, you see the range from lowest performing, which is red, up to highest performance, which is blue. This is our grid here also that also shows those colors, and as you can see kind of where it connects. So you see where they achieve, what their scores were for the current year compared to where their scores were for the previous year, and where it intersects is where you see their colors. So if you see here, the current year was at a high level of performance, and that was an increase from the prior year, and where it connects, that students right there showing that they are green. I don't particularly like this one, but some of you may like that one. I don't like that one too much. I like this one. So when you go to the dashboard and you see our overall data, you see this information. And it's, it's a stoplight, it has different colors, you see the different arrows, but this page alone does not really tell you how our students are achieving or how we're doing as a district, because it just has the colors, and those colors don't mean anything if you don't know if that means the student, if they grew, if they declined, if they maintained. So when you look at the dashboard on your own on other days, don't stop at this page, you gotta go deeper, which is what we're going to do tonight. So we're gonna go deeper right now. We're gonna start looking at our data for our English language arts as measured by 2024 CAS data for grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. The current year, we're showing 11.2 points below the standard. The current year minus the prior, which is the change, there was a change of 1.3 points, which was basically we just maintained our achievement. Where the students were the previous year and the current year, there wasn't really much difference. So the students kind of stayed where they were, which can indicate the practices that we were using are kind of maintaining students, but we do want to look and see what we can do to take them to a deeper level. This page here looks at our subgroup data. And when you get into the subgroup data, this is where you start to see some disparities in our subgroups. And so the first group here, you see there's various ranges on here. We have groups that increase their performance. Our African American students, our homeless, and our socially economically disadvantaged students. All of those students increased in their points, and I think that's important to note. They may not be in the green, but they definitely are moving forward. We want to move the arrow to the right and not to the left. So those students have made gains. So if you just looked at this screen and you saw yellow, you would not necessarily know if that meant they maintained or increased or decreased from the previous slide. So on this slide, you can actually see the number of points and their distance from the standard, which is the number of students, the average of the number of students, the distance that the average group of students have from meeting the baseline level of proficiency. That's what that distance from the standard represents. Okay, so we're looking at our English language arts data here, and this is a comparison for our English learners, and we have a lot in our district, and so I think it's important that we track those students. So currently, our current English language learners, there was a decline. If you see, there were 291 students in that number. We have students that were reclassified. So our reclassified English learners, they are 14.8 points above the standard. These are our students who originally were identified as non-English speakers or non-proficient English, and they obtained their level of proficiency and they were able to be reclassified. And as you can see, they're students, they're making progress, and we like to see that. That's important. And then you can see the achievement of our students that are English only, and their data came in 1 point below the standard. They maintained from where they were from the previous year. Now, from that data, looking at our subgroup data, we do have two groups that were in the red. And because these two groups are in the red, we have been identified for needing differentiated assistance for those two groups, which is our long-term English learners and our students with disabilities. And so when we talk about equity and really making sure we're meeting the needs of students, we really want to dig deeper to determine what it is that we need to do to help, one, our long-term English learners become proficient in English. That's huge. And so we're seeing if they're not becoming proficient in English, we're not seeing the growth in their academic achievement as well. So those are two areas that we are targeting, and I know that the schools have also identified those groups in their single plan for student achievement. They've identified some goals and some actions and some tools to monitor their performance to determine if we're making progress. And then with our students with disability, that's a huge gap there. But one thing I just want to note, when we look at each of our subgroups, we look at those groups of students for who they are and their level of achievement, where they started and where they're going. And so we don't say like if one group of students is 150 points above the standard, a group that's not as close to that another group can achieve at the same level if the levels are off. So we're not going to be able to take a group of students, well, not unless we're miracle workers, but in 1 year, we won't be able to take students that are negative 131 and move them up 200 points. That's not realistic, but it is realistic that we can move them and make progress. And so if we make progress, we will then see that lever, that arrow move forward, because it's about change. So just that's something to note. We do have a plan in place to target our students with disabilities, as well as working with the teachers and working with the administrators. We do have some actions and some plans that we put in place because we recognize that that is an area of need. And so we definitely have put some things in place to target that. I do want to spotlight on each of the sections. I've identified a couple of schools just to kind of spotlight some of their data. And then when we get to the point where we have discussions, if you want to talk to them a little bit about how they did that, that's your prerogative. So on here, I chose to spotlight Valley View's ELA data, their achievement for all students. They scored in the green. So when you score in the green or the red, that's huge, and that's something to celebrate, because that means that the students have made, they've made progress every year. They did not drop. And so here, at this site, the students scored 19.2 points above the standard, and from the previous year, that was an increase of 4.9 points. So I just want to highlight that they were in the green. Yay, yay. For the big shout out to Valley View. Good job, Ms. Fish. Then moving into our academic performance for mathematics, as measured by the 2024 CAS. So the current year right now, when we looked at our data, it was 47.3 points below the standard. That doesn't mean every student is below the standard. So just want to make that note. So if you're looking at like, oh my God, it's not every student, 47% of students. And then if you look at from the current year to the prior year, That was an increase of 4.2. So that the year before, I believe it was orange, and that's why we moved to the yellow. So we are making, remember, we want to move to the right, not to the left, except if there's other areas. Okay. So again, looking at our subgroup data, because it's important to note so we can see, are there achievement gaps? Where are the disparities? Where do they exist? So for all students, they're 47.3 points below the standard. That was an increase of 4.2, but there are some groups that increase. Our African American students, our English learners, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. They did show points increase from the previous year to current year. There are some that just maintain, which means they didn't really grow too much, at less than 3 points, so they just kind of maintain their achievement. And then, of course, there are a couple that decline, which they had some drops, and that's just noted here in the data. So if we were looking at this and saying, what do we need to do to kind of close that academic achievement gap, we would look at these particular groups and say, what's going on? What do we need to do differently for them? Or what's working with one group of students? Can it work with another? How do we differentiate our instruction? How do we provide additional supports to increase our student achievement? Again, comparing the data of our English learners, we have our current English learners. You can see where they perform. We see some negative points, like negative, they dropped a little bit, but it wasn't significant. So these three groups, they kind of maintained from where they were from the previous year to the current year in mathematics. They just kind of held steady at where they were from the previous year. Two groups in the red again, our long-term English learners and our students with disability. And so because they were red in 2 or more areas, that's why these groups have been identified as we're getting a differentiated assistance. And we're working with LACO. We have some plans in place to target that and how we can address those needs. Mathematics is also an area that we are targeting in our learning walks this year, walking through and looking at our instructional practices and working with the team to figure out ways that we can improve students' understanding of mathematics. Doing it for reading in all the other areas as well. So don't want to make it seem like it's only math. We're looking at all areas, but highlighting that one. Just spotlight on Maxwell's achievement for mathematics. If you look at what Maxwell they did, they had an increase of 9.9 points from the previous year. So I just want to shout out to Maxwell for their achievement in mathematics with the increase there. We do have science data, so you can see the science data. There's no color because there's no comparison. This is the first year that we have that science data. So there's no color, but you can see where we are. Now moving into our English language learner progress, our LP data, 45.7% of our students are making steady progress and becoming proficient in the English language. The current year data minus prior year, there was a decline of 5.1. That put us in the red. This total of 486 students. And with our LP data as well, included in that data is also information about our long-term English learners. So if you see here, there's the 2 groups of students, the data is listed here. Spotlight on Duarte High School on their achievement with the English language learner progress. They are in the green. Let's get a shout out. Thank you. Whoop, whoop. Yes, that's something to celebrate. When you celebrate the green and red, that means their students are making some significant increases. It doesn't mean they may not be at the level where we want them to be, but it does say that these students have made significant progress. They're doing some great things at Duarte High and addressing the needs of our English learners. And so we just want to note that and recognize them publicly for the hard work that they're doing, because it's important that our English learners become proficient, because if not, we have those long-term English learners, and as you've seen in the data, that can be problematic in their achievement. So good job on making that progress there. They had an increase of 5%. Now, if we look at absenteeism, chronic absenteeism looking at what it is, as you can see on every one of these, this is positive. There was a decline. So that's good. We want kids at school. We want to see declines here. We don't want to see declines on the others, but on this one, this is where we want to see it. So our students are coming to school. And if you look at this data, even across the boards, across the subgroup data, you see it's pretty equitable there. So that is awesome. Our kids are wanting to be at school. We want them there. Looking at the conditions and climates for all students in terms of the suspension rate, this is also an area that is a shout out. We are in the green on this one. So if you see the decrease, it was a decline of 3%. So what the data says, 3.9% suspended at least one day in that school year. So that was that's better than what it was. So if you see the current year to the prior year to the current year, you see where we had a decline there. And so we're celebrating that. We're doing some great things in there, teaching kids. Our PBIS is working, creating those positive environments where students want to be at school, holding them accountable, and teaching them behavior like we teach our academics. And I believe it's definitely working, making a difference, and also building those relationships. So looking at academic engagement and looking at the graduation rate, the percentage of students that graduated with a diploma. There we go, big shout out to Duarte High School and to Mount Olive. Both of our schools, we see a 95% graduation rate there. That is an increase at DHS from increased by 10%, and at MIT increased by 12%. I think that's worth some snaps right there, because that's awesome, because that's in the blue and the green, and we're very proud of their achievement. Congratulations there. So next we're going to look at college and career, that college and career indicator, and so listed some of the areas that we look at. So in order for, we want to look at, are our students leaving school prepared to go to college? Are they ready? So here's some, they have to meet one of these criteria, and you see those criteria that are listed there, and I will then go on to the next slide and show our data for that. So if you look at college and career readiness by student groups, for all of our students in the green, snaps out on the green, that's great. But we do have some disparities when we get into our subgroups, which just means we need to focus in on all of the students to see what is it we can do to improve this data for our students. So particularly our English learners and long-term English learners, we did see a decline, but we saw an increase in college and career readiness among our students with disabilities, and that's awesome because we were in the red on some of the other areas, but we are making some headway, so I think that's something to note too. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the dashboard, is that we're not just looking at one indicator. It's not one indicator that says your district is doing well or your school is successful. There are multiple measures that we're looking at, and there are areas to celebrate and areas room for growth, and we will continue to work on those as a team to move all of our students. So you see we had an increase with our students with disability. There was an increase with our homeless, an increase with our Hispanic students, as well as our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and some of them are in the green, so that's awesome. We want to see increases because remember, it's about change and growth, right? That's what we're striving to see. Then there are also local performance indicators, and we had a standard met on all of the local indicators as listed there. Now, what's next? What's working? What's not working? So I just kind of compiled a few strategies about what's working, what's not. Some of the things some of the strategies that are being implemented at the school sites as it relates to English language arts. They are doing weekly collaborations. The teams come together to analyze data, to look at where are the gaps, what do students need, how can we provide instruction to increase and challenge our students and support those that are in need, what type of diagnostic assessments are we using to kind of diagnose where the challenging areas are, looking at reading intervention, school-wide, small group, looking at the small group instruction, having reading incentives in place, and targeting that comprehension. Those are just a few. In your books, you have, like I said, a summary of each school site, and you may see some more strategies that the schools are using specifically there. Some areas to continue to focus on with our growth is we want to continue to focus on evidence-based interventions and targeting our deficits. We don't just want to randomly select strategies. We want to make sure that they're research-based, that they're backed, and that they can also help make a difference. We need to look at additional tutoring for our students, professional development for teachers. I know teachers, self-efficacy is huge. We want our teachers, we want to know that they're confident and they know that they can make a difference in the lives of our students. And I think that that alone makes a huge difference for teachers. So we want to continue to pour into our teachers. We want to pour into our site administrators. They're the instructional leaders on the campus. We want to make sure they're equipped with the knowledge and skills that they need to continue to monitor the instructional programs at their sites. And then we want to look at how can we really build that critical thinking and problem solving for our students, because just being able to read words on the page is not enough. We need them to be able to read, we need them to be able to understand, we need them to be able to ask questions, we need them to be able to think critically, we need them to be able to analyze and synthesize that information. So then we also want to look at how can we continue to provide differentiated instruction. The data tells us, and we make data-driven decisions, that we do have subgroups of students that need different type, different levels of instruction and different levels of support. And we use that, that's how we'll use that information to kind of drive differentiated instruction, which is the first instruction happening in the classroom with the teachers. And then school-wide interventions, more of those. If we're not, how can we have more school-wide interventions? And making sure the content standards are being addressed, particularly identifying, are there particular standards where students are having the most difficulty, and how can we target those particular standards to move our students along, as well as looking what are the key standards that our students are lacking, because those key standards are fundamental to their progression and their growth. What's next for our English learners? We want to continue to implement these practices here. Explicit vocabulary instruction. We know that language development is key, so you want to make sure that we're doing the tier vocabulary, making sure it's very clear, very explicit for students, that they have multiple opportunities to use and practice the language. We want to make sure that they can access the learning, that we're scaffolding, providing visual aids, where when we have opportunities to use the home language. I know at Beardsley we have the dual immersion program, and our students are learning in Spanish, and I know that that's making a difference. We're offering Spanish at our other sites as well. And then what does English language development look like? We have to be very intentional and very strategic in how we address our English language development. We cannot just assume it's being done. So we want to make sure that we've identified what it is that we're doing, who are the students that actually need that development, how can we track and monitor to make sure that they are actually accessing and learning what we are teaching. We have using the Kagan strategies and different collaborative strategies at all the school sites as students coming together, not just completing an assignment, but it's the mental work that's involved, right? So when we talk about what is collaboration, I think we'll have an opportunity to do that too. It's the brain work, it's the thinking behind what we're doing. And students actually have an opportunity to engage in that discourse about their thinking and the strategies and problem solving together that bringing the multiple brains together. And then frequent speaking opportunities for our students. We want to make sure that in the class we're holding them accountable for speaking in complete sentences. We want to make sure that we're giving them opportunities to speak, providing them with sentence frames if they're having difficulty, making sure they have good models and we're guiding them along the way, and that consistent practices are being implemented, because consistency is the key across the board. And then our professional learning communities, that's bringing our teams together to talk about where our students are and what do we need to do. Okay? And then in mathematics, again, what's working in mathematics? Because we know we have groups that have increased in their achievement, we have groups that maintained, and we have some groups that dropped. And so some of the strategies that are being implemented, we have at some sites math interventions, school-wide math interventions. Some are just grade level interventions, but we know that we need to intervene and go back and reteach whatever those concepts where students were struggling. And then looking at math remediation, because you know that's a different level where we have students that may be struggling multiple years with some math concepts, and so we're not just reteaching the concepts for the current grade level, we're going in and we're remediating to kind of fill in the holes from some of the previous years of learning. And we know math spirals and it builds, so we really want to make sure we fill in those holes for our students. In some sites we have IXL, which is an online program that helps with mathematics. And then one thing that we cannot overlook that is extremely important is that direct instruction, that first instruction. So we can bring in programs all day long, but it's the people, not the programs, that make a difference in the learning for students. And so that direct instruction, that hands-on, that interactive instruction for students, we know that that's key. So some of the areas of growth continue to implement evidence-based practices, looking at our math pacing to make sure we're covering all the content that needs to be covered, that provides the solid foundations for our students, providing interventions, making sure students are developing the conceptual knowledge and the procedural knowledge, making sure our students are able to communicate their ideas in mathematics, write their ideas in mathematics. That discourse is so important. And then we need to make sure our students have the wittedness, that they stick the grit, that they can persevere in all subject areas. So if they come across a difficult math problem, if they're struggling with their language proficiency, or if they're struggling with their reading, that they have the ability to persevere. And we have to teach that, and we have to hold kids accountable, make provisions for that for our students. So that's kind of in a nutshell our district level data. You can explore it more. You have information in your booklet, as well as this is the website for the California dashboard. And then in summary, just from my part, before we get into the question and answer part of our session is the dashboard is a comprehensive overview of our performance on the state and local indicators. As you see, it enables us to make data-driven decisions, to track performance, identify those trends, what are the trends and patterns in the learning, and to quickly respond to any issues that we have identified. It's also a tool that our educational partners can access to look at our progress. So it's full transparency when it comes to the dashboard. You can't hide. It's like the data is right there so you can look at it. And we're not trying to hide behind our data. We want people to look at it. We want to be able to talk about it like, what can we do better? This is a team effort. We know that in public education, it's a collaborative effort, a community of people working together to make a difference in the lives of students. So we want people, if they have better ideas that they can offer us, we welcome those. We welcome the opportunity to collaborate with others. So I want to thank you for paying attention to this portion of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions or to dive deeper into any measures or any indicators discussed, and the site administrators are here to answer any questions that you may have regarding their goals and actions, or if you have any questions about their data. But I'm going to remove myself from the platform and come and sit down here because now we could get into the study sessions for questions and answers, comments, concerns, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lawson. Appreciate, yes, deep breath, deep breath. Excellent, excellent presentation. Thank you for all of this and for giving a lot of great explanations to all of us here. Board, are there any questions that you have for Dr. Lawson or for any of the other site administrators?
I do. My question is, what's the difference between English learner and long-term English learners? I was a little confused with that.
Okay, so students that are English learners are when they when they enroll in school, they do a home survey and they indicate what the language is that's spoken in the home. And if they say the language is anything other than English, then they are considered an English language. There's another language that's their primary language. Long-term English learners are students who came in, they were identified as English learners, which means their first language was not English, and they have not been reclassified. So they've been identified as an English learner. They have not met the level of proficiency to be reclassified as a proficient English learner, as a proficient English speaker. So an English learner and a long-term English learner, they're the same, just one has been in it over 7 years. So you can look at EL's new, long-term is multiple years, over 7 years. And so our goal really is we want to really target those LTELs because when they get to high school, it's difficult, right? And as you see in the data, when they're at the school sites, if you look at our LTELs were identified in the red for two of the areas, and those are academic areas, right? So we really want to make sure we're targeting those students, helping them become proficient in the English language, so then that will transfer into like English language arts and then mathematics, and it help improve their achievement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll piggyback a little bit on her question. So when an English language learner is reclassified, are they reclassified as like different levels, or are they just not an English language learner anymore?
They are called RFEPs, reclassified fluent English speakers.
Okay.
Yeah. So then when we look at our data, they're not in our English language learner data anymore. And if you look on that one, I gave a comparison slide for English language arts and for mathematics. There were 3 groups of students on there. We had our students who were reclassified. Those were students who came in as English learners, but then were reclassified. And then we had our English only students and then our English learners. So they're a group of students and we still track their data each year. And then we also have to monitor those students. After they've been reclassified, we have to have a plan in place how we can monitor because we don't want them to slip or decline in their achievement. So we do have to monitor their achievement as well.
Okay. And then I don't know, this might be a question more for Beardsley. So I don't know if there's any data out there about this, but I'm just kind of curious because we have a phenomenal dual immersion program. Does that seem to help students become reclassified more quickly, or does it take them more time because there's more Spanish being spoken at school?
So that's a good question. As far as the reclassification, I am happy to say we're looking at that data right now. And so you will see students reclassify. I don't have the exact data of how many more are reclassifying who have been through the program, but I could get that information to you. I have done a deep dive into the students overall in like English language arts and in math who are progressing through the program. And this year, the data was significant for the progress they're making. And, you know, I can share that with you at a different time. It's not like on the dashboard, but I do a deep dive just to see the difference of the students in the dual immersion program as opposed to the English only. Of course, we have success in both, but that is interesting data to look at. And statistically, it does show that they will achieve at a higher level long-term. And I'm seeing that data come through. But as far as the reclassification, that's a great question. And because our first cohort is in 8th grade, they could start reclassifying obviously much younger than that, but it would be interesting data to gather. So I'll get that to you.
Great, thank you very much. Other questions, board?
I have several questions, but since we're talking about English learners, I'll just kind of go to those. So just for clarification, when we're looking at the subgroup of English learners, does that pull together current ELs plus those who are being monitored after being reclassified? No, okay. Because I'm just curious, looking at the English language arts by subgroup, we have that our ELs maintained 0.2 points, but then on the next page, where it has the data comparison for English learners, it says current ELs declined 8.5 points, whereas recently reclassified English learners maintained 0.4 points. So I was just curious where that difference in data comes from.
Can you repeat your question again? You're saying,
Yeah.
say it again.
So I was just wondering, and I look at this stuff all the time, and it's the first time I was like, oh, hey, I never thought about that. So on the slide that starts with English language arts by subgroups, that looks like this. On that one, for the EL subgroup, they are, let's see here, 55.7 points below standard, maintained 0.2 points. And then if you go to that next page below, it has current English learners and recently reclassified English learners, and that's why I'm asking, like, does the...
They are included.
Got it, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
for the portion of time that they are being monitored.
For the monitoring,
Post-reclassification.
And can someone remind me the time for that monitoring? Is it 2 years, 3 years?
4 years.
Okay, all right, excellent. Okay. And then,
Just on here, just within the prior 4 years for those recently classified.
prior 4 years. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then I'm super excited that LTELs are being included on the dashboard because I think it's a really critical subgroup for us to focus on. I mean, our goal is to not create them in the first place, right? And move them through those proficiency levels. So I'm just curious, now that it's here, the phenomenon isn't new, and it's been talked a lot about in California for at least a decade now. So what are some things that are in place? I know you called out, what's working, what's next, focus on growth. Have you guys considered anything that really just focuses on that LTEL population? And I'm thinking more beyond just strategy and program placement. Those things are super important. But just like, do the kids know what it means to be an LTEL? Do they know what the reclassification criteria is? Are there data talks with them? Do their families know? Do we party when they reclassify?
And I'd say
love
yes
the
to
heads
all,
nodding.
yes to all of those because, and we're actually currently doing the summit of LPACs now.
Yes.
And so the teaching and learning coaches have met with students and they talk to them. So yes, they know they know what it takes to be reclassified. Some of our students that are like right there on the cusp, they know in terms of like their Lexile scores, what they need to achieve on their Lexile scores and giving them that extra push. There are meetings with parents. We do have our ELAC meetings at the school site. We do talk about this as well at the DLAC meetings with the parents about reclassification. We just talked about that at our last meeting about what is reclassification, why it's important to reclassify our students. And yes, we do celebrate them at the school sites, but I think the sites I'm thinking of the celebrations I had when I was at Maxwell last year, but I'm going to allow the principals at the sites to talk about what they're doing with their English learners and their LTELs and how they celebrate them. And so I'll just allow them briefly to kind of share that.
You said briefly when you looked at me. Actually, I was looking at my calendar because we're recognizing them on March 26th. We'll be
come?
recognizing all of the reclassified students. And we do meet with the students. We also do some, I don't want to say test prep, but like one-on-one meetings, in all honesty, to let them know like what is the criteria, where do you need to be, not just on the LPAC, but also on the, CASP. And so that's important. But I was just meeting with the TLC today, and she was talking to a teacher and about 3 kids who she was just so proud of because they're 8th graders going to the high school. More than that, but she was just talking about these specific ones, and they'll be reclassifying. And so they were really, really excited themselves to hear
Yeah.
that today. So
That's wonderful.
But
It's a big deal.
yeah, and you could come by March 26th.
Yeah, if
We
you
even have
could invite the
cupcakes.
board to those things, I think when we're available, it'd be really nice to celebrate along that because it's
26. And the parents come. It's really exciting for the parents too, because these are parents of, previous English learners. And so they have seen them, progress and make that progress. And they're very proud to see that.
yeah.
So,
And I think it's a beautiful thing, at our elementary sites. I know I think it's just Valley View, right? But just if we could work together and not send them on to middle school as long-term English learners, or not send them on to high school so that they have, the access to A through G, all that good stuff. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay, it's still on EL. So under kind of what's working, what's next, you bulleted out English language development. And so is each site with ELs doing like their daily 45 minutes? Are they doing it by proficiency level? What curriculum's being used?
Go ahead, site administrators, you can respond to that.
I can speak for us, and yes, and that's been a focus this year on what that actually looks like. So we've done some pilot of some programs, but as the data has been driving our instruction, it looks very different at the different grade levels, what the sort of hindrance is. As we can, on the LPAC, you can do a deep dive, where is the area? And so in terms of helping our students, it tends to be writing with our middle school. And so that tends to be the focus of the ELD specific instruction in middle school, particularly not in their English class. And so one of the things that the LPAC requires is a broader knowledge. So a lot of times they're writing on a subject it's not a creative story, or the listening comprehension. I actually just came from school site council and we were talking. I took the test one time, like I was just listening, and you get one chance. And I was like, oh, I'm an adult and I know I'm gonna take a test on this, and yet I'm still having trouble focusing. And so that's a lot of the coaching as well. But in terms of ELD, it looks a little bit different at each grade level, targeted based on their LPAC data specifically. So many of the K1, for example, it's the speaking. They either overspeak or underspeak, and so it's really helping them to learn that structure. And then writing their letters, they're supposed to be able to write their letters, and they're just learning them, and so their instruction is very targeted. And the K through 3, at least at Maxwell, is doing rotation of groups, so organizing kids by their area of need. Not always their level.
Good.
Sometimes their level in conjunction with their area of need, because sometimes a student, for example, the LPAC score might be a 2, but they actually might be a 4 in listening and speaking, and so less about level and more about specific skill.
I appreciate that. I think that's a really important point to consider, kind of going back to the LTEL. We have a student who's been having ELD support for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and there are 2 on the LPAC. It makes no sense to continue to give them beginning level English instruction and say, why aren't they progressing? What they need is advanced instruction in English. So, very good.
Can I just add, I also think the other piece is being very intentional about teaching English language development. and not just assuming this. We use visual aids and we use those SEDI strategies with all students, but being very specific and intentional in targeting who the language learners are and making sure they are actually making that progress. And so I think that that's key when you're breaking them, when you group them according to their levels, as well as when you're providing that intentional writing instruction and making sure that the level of the questioning that they were hearing in the classroom, that the expectation of their response meets the level of questioning. And I think that that's also key.
Thank you.
I have a question. This was a great presentation, by the way. Thank you. We adopted back in 2016 a resolution for the Read by Third Grade initiative. Where are we at as far as those scores are going, and how are we tracking, and how are we ensuring that our kids are reading, our children, our students are reading by third grade? Because I know on here there isn't the third grade scores, okay, but I'd like to know what we're doing to reach that goal. Thanks.
So this data includes 3rd through 8th grade and 11th grade. So they are part of this dashboard data. We do have that information, their scores. So they do test at 3rd grade. So if we were to look specifically, and I'm gonna have this memorized, our CAS data, we do get that data for 3rd graders for their English language arts. And so we get the different levels of their achievement, the 4 areas on the CAS score. And so I would say the focus is we look at K2, because we know that when they get to 3rd grade, it's not just the third grade teachers are not the ones that make the difference. It's TK preschool up to 3rd grade. When they test, that's a representation of what they've learned over the last, since TK or kindergarten, right? So some of the things that they're doing at the school site, I know in our primary grades, they use the ESGI assessment, and that's in kinder and 1st grade, to track students' reading readiness. They're targeting the phonics influence instruction in the primary grades to teach kids to read. We know that in K through 2, we're teaching kids to read, and so that's like all the foundational skills. And then when they get to 3rd grade on up, they need to be able to demonstrate that in their reading comprehension. I think that that's where we start to see some gaps in students' ability to really dissect the text that they're reading that complex text, and really demonstrating their understanding and their comprehension. So we do have our Star Renaissance data that we use at the school site, which is our benchmark data. We do administer those assessments every 6 to 8 weeks. We do meet with my mouth was right, and he drinks water, excuse me. Talking a lot. We do meet the instructional leaders, the site administrators. We meet to look at the Renaissance data. We desegregate that data by subgroup. We look at the standards that are targeted. We look at the students' Lexile levels, so they're able to track it. And so we want our students to read by 3rd grade as well. Well, we know that there are some challenges there, but there is a conscious effort in targeting fluency and literacy from preschool on up. And so using our Renaissance data, that STAR data, we did recently add Accelerated Reader at the school sites, which is a reading incentive program. It allows our kids to read. In order to read by 9, you have to read by 5, really. You need to read every day. And part of the challenge is getting kids to read just recreationally, right? Not just reading the books in the class, but reading on their own, because that's where you're gonna build your reading skills. That's also where you're gonna build their ability to be more proficient writers. And so we do have Accelerated Reader where they can read the books, they can take assessments. It gives them a score in terms of where they are of their comprehension, and some of the foundational skills, kind of identifying what some of the gaps are. And there's a tool that can be used to identify where the skill gaps are, so the teachers can provide some explicit instruction in those skill areas. So we do have that district-wide at our school sites. So we're targeting it, but we know that there's more work to do, but we definitely are making a conscious effort to target reading by 3rd grade.
Could you send me those numbers, please, for
Sure.
for 3rd grade?
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
I'm also wondering, just piggybacking off of Tom's comment, if it would, just something for us to consider, might be nice to include even a mini study session, just to kind of correlate this to what's the other, data quest? Is that what I'm thinking of? Where you can break it down by grade level, by school site, or, yeah, just to look at it. You know what I'm talking about?
Data quest information, then there's the CAPS data, and then there's the information for the dashboard, those three different measures, yes.
Yeah, just, not today, I mean, but. at
And when you
another
go
time.
on the, just so you know,
Yeah.
when you go on the California School Dashboard, which, by the way, although it's printed out here and very dense, going in, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a second, is on the dashboard itself for the community, for everyone to see. You can go into any school district, and it's very flexible. You can kind of poke
Okay.
around, if you will, but it also connects directly to that data quest too. So
Oh,
there's a way
okay.
to, it kind of
Okay.
links into that as well.
Got it, okay.
And anytime you, if the board, anytime need more data, please let us know, and we're happy to provide it as well.
Definitely. And then a follow-up question. So we had COVID, we had interrupted schooling. We tried to teach kids how to read over a computer, which isn't effective. And so I'm just wondering, have you started to see some shifts now that that cohort, now that our second graders have been in school for kindergarten, first, second grade? Are we starting to see, they call it like the COVID slide? Are we seeing some of that shift?
I'm going to allow the site administrators to respond to that. Ms. Fish, would you like to chime in on that?
And if I put you on the spot and you'd like to respond later, that's fine too. Okay.
I definitely think that we see where the gaps are, whether it is, I don't need these to see you, whether it is students with their writing where they're missing the conventions is a huge struggle because they didn't have the practice of writing on paper in a classroom with their teacher, those kinds of things. When they're developing their reading knowledge, just learning the phonemes, all that basic foundational skills, you don't even have the practice with how you move your mouth to make the certain sounds, all those things. So what we look at now is when we identify those gaps is targeting them specifically. And if we identify certain students who even by first or second grade, like to Tom's question, when we're trying to make sure they're reading by third grade, even before then, but looking at how we can utilize response to intervention or RTI to target those kiddos who need those foundational skills. Some, it's not as significant. Others, it's very obvious who needs the more intense intervention. So old school programs, that first instruction, the direct instruction, reading mastery is something that we utilize consistently. We see that it makes the difference for our kiddos. And to hear a first grader, I have a video of him singing it, saying, I am so smart, I can read now. And then he started singing This Boy Is on Fire, and it's literally the cutest thing I've ever seen. But they know where they struggle, but they know also when they're making those gains. But it's very clear to see where these gaps are because it's pretty consistent across the board. And so it's easier, when it's consistent, it's easier to target that whole group, large group, things like that. But when we see those kiddos who need the more intensive direct intervention, that's where that real intense RTI comes in. So,
Thank you.
More than questions, I have comments. And one of my comments was exactly what Dr. Hassel just mentioned, how COVID affect our kids and our students. And personally, I know a lot of families that have reached to me and say, parents that they don't even know how to read or write, and how can they help their kids? And when COVID hit, it was really hard for them. And they can see how behind their kids are now. And they just trust on the teachers. And I can tell you, right now we have 10 people, 10 persons in here sitting around that are responsible for the entire education of our students. And it's in our hands. And we as a board can make decisions, can make recommendations, can ask, but all of you are the ones who know what's going on in your classroom. And even you as a principals, because you were teachers before, you know most of the students, but it's every teacher that is working with these kids. And sometimes I believe that it's hard for them, not hard, but it's a challenge to make sure that the kids understand everything that they're explaining. And I would ask, parent and family engagement is standard met. How do we measure that?
So there's a reflection tool that we use to rate ourselves on those different standards. And so I have a copy of that, hold on. Hold on. It's a self-reflection tool, and it has various questions that you answer as it relates to those different local indicators. And then once you do your score, you get a score, and then it determines if your standard's met, not met, et cetera.
Do you believe that Team Together played an important role for these kids to be able to bring their homework the next day? If it wasn't for them, our kids will be way behind at the point that they are right now?
Our after-school program? Right. So anytime our students get additional support, we know that's important. And our families are, working and not coming home, not able to be with their student maybe after school. And the support that they receive there is one component of it. We know that our Think Together partners work with our site principals to make sure they know what generally the goals are for the students. The after-school program, they're not teachers, but they are adults who are there to support children. So we know any additional support that we can provide children is excellent. Many of our schools also have after the bell and other types of programs that maybe teachers are conducting with students after school and even before school as well. That's a little bit different, but that's another additional support out there as well.
So we know that we are doing everything that is possible to help our students, right?
We'll just exactly everything that's possible and more, and we'll continue to explore those options as we have the resources.
And
Just add one thing just to that, and also the Think Together program, they do work to try and have make it a seamless progression from the school day to the after-school day. And so they have a meeting at the beginning of the year. The program leaders meet with the site administrators. They do goal setting, and then I do meet with Think Together monthly, and they do talk about their focus and how they're supporting our students. So there's a collaborative effort to work with our students to help them make progress.
we are, something that I have noticed in our community is that I would say, unfortunately, many of our parents have give access to probably students in second grade to be with the phone when they get home. That's a huge disadvantage for our students. And I have seen many, many kids playing with their phone. And it's hard for parents to tell them, you better do your homework or do this, because cell phone was not available for the parents. So he wants to help give their kids what they think is the best. So sometimes technology is making, harder for the students to learn because they are playing. They are not really reading or doing something that will help them in education. And I see that that is a challenge, besides what Dr. Hasso just mentioned about how COVID hit. And I will put it in a different ways that I have talked to some parents, and I say, when COVID hit, is like if a person have cancer, in order for them fully recover from cancer, they have to go through a tough time. And it's gonna take a long time to recover. Our kids are behind. And that's no way, there is no doubt about it. But life is changing. Technology, what is going on right now with the parents. Kids are worried the mom and dad was gonna leave them. And I have received a lot of phone calls from parents that are really concerned. And so it is a huge challenge that all of you have right now and that we have. But you are every single day at your school sites. So I am very blessed and pleased to see this report. And I believe that what the institute that was from parents at the high school this last year, what was the name? PK. I think it was an amazing tool for many parents that have reached to me and say, now I know what I want for my kid. Now I can help them to do, just to motivate them. Keep doing it. Just do it and do this. And parents sometimes, they have a full-time work. And so they get home, they cook, they clean up, and then they have to be ready to do the same thing for next day. But now they're taking the time to push their kids and say, yeah, you can do it. I know you can do it. And they give that time. So I think the programs like that will help parents too. And if anything that this board can help, we are not here just to approve or disapprove any, any of the items that our Dr. Hillman bring to us. It is our responsibility to make sure that these kids receive equal education, no matter if they are English learners or, I mean, if they are fully English, no matter what their situation is, all of them deserve our attention. So I appreciate all your input, all your insights. And I have a lot of questions, but I also, when I make the questions, I also make the answers. I look for the answers, and before I ask, I respond myself. And I think that I've been here a long time, and I will not say too long, no, because every year has been a challenge since I started. It was nothing, I can name you all the superintendents that I went through. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge, and I am very proud to serve in this board, on this board, because all of you, because you help to show that we can do it, because you help us to look good also, and sometimes not too good, but we're doing our best. I mean, what can we do? I can't believe that Dr. Lawson is doing this presentation right now. When did you start? How many months? How long ago? 4 months? 5 months? 4 months?
32 years ago, I've been prepping for 32 years. One thing I just want to just say, I think that it's important when we look at any data, especially the dashboard data, is the change. We want to make sure that our students are making gains. And we know that the different subgroups, different students, they come in at different levels. And they're not all, they're not all the same at level 5 when they come in. And so you have level 6 and 12 and 24. And so the school sites have to look at all those levels and say, how do I take this student from where they are and how do I move them forward? And it's not just a simple, one strategy doesn't work. You have to figure out what's going to be the best approach to meet the needs of these 4 students and these 6 students. And it's like a nice little balancing act, but I think that knowing that the sites are supported and they know that we're all on the same team and we're looking for growth, and that value-added piece is what's going to make the difference for the work that we have to continue to do, because we have a lot of work to do. You know, we look at our students with disabilities and with our long-term English learners, we got to cover some territory. But I know that, you know, we have a great team. A great collaborative team. They're very knowledgeable with our teachers, our teaching and learning coaches, our instructional aides, our directors, you know, our custodial staff, everybody. With everybody working together, I believe we will continue to make a difference. But never forgetting that it's the change we're looking for. Are the students moving forward? And so even if it's 17 points, 100 points, we just don't want negatives. We want to see them make that positive progress every year. I think that that's just very important to remember. Thank you.
Last question, promise. For me. I'd like to ask the principals if you can give some examples to the board, what your reading incentives look like at your school sites.
Some of our, aside from just our regular, not that they're regular, but aside from our trimester awards, things like that, where we recognize students for achievement or for effort in the area of language arts as well as other areas, we also look at, before we had scholastic reading counts, and now we have accelerated reader, but recognizing students for reading books, taking quizzes, and they get recognized, but they are rewarded with more books and prizes as well. But things like that, just to incentivize being a reader and being motivated and excited about reading, but they get, Miss Jansen will come around, our teaching and learning coach will go around with her cart of books and they get to choose books, and that's the incentive. But recognizing the students for achievement, you know, a lot of our kiddos are doing their data notebooks, data binders, so they are tracking their own progress as well, which is just knowing that you're setting goals for yourself and achieving those goals, even recognizing kiddos where you made your goal here. This is huge, celebrating them. So within the classroom, but school-wide as well. So those are just some examples.
I'll add. So it's funny you asked that question because this year, as our leadership, we're looking to create a new reading incentive program because we didn't feel we were recognizing reading as we should. We had our reading counts and our scholastic, but now we're moving to, or we have moved to accelerated reader, which now they're taking quizzes and they're getting points. And so teachers are starting to play with things within their classroom as how to incentivize their students. And every time we meet at least once a month with leadership, we're talking about, okay, what do we want this to look like school-wide? And we were pretty advantageous, and it was, it failed. I'm being honest, like it failed because we were like, we're not recognizing enough students. And so once we, thank you to the board and Dr. Hillman for bringing in accelerated reader, that's making the difference. So even from our little ones, reading isn't always just about a book, it's sight words. When we talk about our foundational skills, so like our little kiddos, they'll get like little charms for reading certain words or meeting that goal. Even our kids, as Dr. Lawson shared, from reading, our most struggling student who might be in first grade but still on that kindergarten sight list, but wow, they've now mastered 30 words, to see them so excited for that. So we try to take reading not just in like, here's a book, read it, but making sure it meets all levels. But we're actually in the process, so I will share with you when we have finalized. We are having a family literacy night to bring that awareness to our parents, and that's on March 11th. We're very busy in March because it's a long month. But that's exciting too because since we've been talking about this since last year, we are like, we need to get families involved as well so that they see the importance. And we're having a new. We always have scholastic book fairs, but because of our dual and supporting families, especially of our English learners, we're having, it's a new book fair coming called Miha Books, and they're coming the last week in February, and they have multilingual books that we know our population needs for both the dual but also for the homes. So we're bringing a real awareness this next month, and that's thanks to our leadership, and that's our teachers and staff. So that's what we're working on.
We had a similar struggle. What are we recognizing kids for, right? If it's a fifth grader, when we used to do reading counts, it's like a fifth grader who reads a book that's super low level to achieve the point, gets all their points. Are we rewarding the right thing? And so that's been a huge discussion as well. We've tried different iterations of a pastry proficiency party, all sorts of different ways of looking at what defines a reader, because is it sight words? Is it being able to read fluently? Is it comprehension? Is it passing a test? So kind of looking at all those things. And one of the things that I think really got parents involved last year in that is we asked for donation of prizes. And so that really put a different spin on it, because now you have parents going, oh, I can contribute to the reward system. And so we got far more than I think we ever would have imagined, and a wide variety of the students to pick from. So we had middle school families donating gift cards to Starbucks because they knew that was motivating for their own children. And so kind of opened our eyes to different ways of rewarding. This year in a couple of our intervention classes, I challenged the students to say, what would make you want to read? Because I think, similar to what Dr. Lawson was saying, it's that we want that independent reading too, that reading for joy that so many lose when they struggle to read. And I will be the first one to say it because I was one. And so I kind of ignored reading unless I was forced. So I challenged the students in our 2 reading intervention classes to say, what would motivate you to pick up a book? What would motivate you to keep reading it and finish it? And I got all kinds of things that I would have never thought of, but not difficult things. Some of them really just want a certificate to hang on their wall. Some of them want an ice cream cone, so trying to personalize it, because I think the other thing with like Ms. Diaz was suggesting, the world is changing. The things that rewarded us as kids no longer are motivating in the same way. Some are, some are not. But so that's something we're looking at too, is as we start to reward and incentivize reading, we want to make sure we're rewarding and incentivizing the right thing. So stay tuned. But yeah, for AR especially, it's like if you take a 1-point test, or a 1-point book, but you're reading at a 30-point level, we want to make sure. So
I just wanted to add one thing, because we talk a lot right now. I think we're talking about the little guys, right? Our youngest students. I actually saw something really wonderful at the high school. In one of the English classes, the teacher there was really having a time, giving the students some time to do some independent reading. And it was really kind of, Miss Alfred was doing that. And she and I were talking about that, and just really about how to incentivize, older students, even adults, right, to take the time to read. And it's a much different world that we all live in, but continuing to find ways to connect with literature, to connect with books, and connect with reading. So I was really encouraged by that. And I know our middle school, I've been in enough of our middle school classes too, that many of them are doing novel studies, which really then is another way, although it's not independent reading, it's about digging into a novel in a new way so that they see themselves as readers in a different way, not just an excerpt or something like that. So forgive me for interrupting.
These are like the coolest mics I've ever seen. Okay. I definitely wanted to echo what all the other principals were saying as well. One of the things that really has stood out to me at Royal Oaks is that direct celebration from the teachers themselves in class, the immediate feedback. That's been really meaningful. It stood out, and just kind of that instant connection. I mean, it's building the classroom community, and it's demonstrating to students, like, at the moment, that this is important, I'm on the right track, I'm engaged. So something that stood out.
I just want to add one thing that it happens at most of the sites are the book buddies. So the older students read with the younger students, and I think that's a huge motivator, right? Because you have kids that are the kindergartners, and some of those first graders are reading with fifth graders, and they probably reading the fifth grade text, but they're working together, and you have big sisters reading with little brothers, and so I think that is also making a huge impact in students wanting to become more proficient readers. And what it also does is allow students, it doesn't matter what level you are as a reader, you can read with a buddy, and they can be engaged, and they can have discussions, and they can build the comprehension, and they can extend the text. And so I think that that's also one thing that we don't want to overlook, because I know it happens at most of our sites, those reading buddies.
I just want to piggyback on that really quick too, because the other thing that we're starting to realize is to capitalize on the second language. And so we purchased some books, different levels, so parents can read with their students. So the parents' page might be, a little longer and a little more difficult, and then differing levels for the student. But we also did that with bilingual, and so it's really fun. The parent might read in Spanish, but then the child reads in English, or vice versa. And so I know some of those books are also getting used by book buddies to just help them to let both buddies read. Or some of our newcomers to allow them to see text in their home language. So, yes, book buddies.
I have a real quick question. Do any of the schools have any book clubs or reading clubs? Sometimes, if the kids are reading together, maybe they can encourage one another, help one another. Sometimes I think they feel more comfortable with their peers versus being criticized or feeling bad with an adult. Just an idea.
Within classes, yes. Yeah, so I don't know about like a club per se, but within classes, yes, there's absolutely, and that small group instruction, sometimes they do a book club. And last year we did do, in the middle school level, have a outside person come and run a book club that I think was quite successful for middle schoolers, just making sure, choosing a book that was perfect for them, and then allowing them to discuss in a way that makes sense. So,
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about it from the perspective of Mount Olive and our high school students. One of the things that we utilize is building up their confidence to read, because a lot of students are coming in, they're struggling academically, or they're struggling socially, emotionally. So what we try to do is build on their passion. So we find out what it is they want to do. So I'm gonna give you a perfect example. So Ozzie Villa, who, Mr. Harrell's very familiar with him. Great kid. Wanted to be a nurse. That's what he wants to do. This has been quite a ride for him over the past 3 months. He was accepted for an interview for the Kaiser program. He just passed his English class at Citrus today, got a 90% or better, but it was all built off of you can do this. And it's going to be a challenge and it's going to be tough, but you can get through this. And with the support of the teachers, you know, motivating him and helping him through the process, I mean, now he's just running on his own. And he reads, for example, he's taken the a medical terminology course right now because he wants to be a nurse. I think that's important to build on their passion, find out what it is they like, and then just they'll take off on their own and they'll want to read, they'll want to write, they'll want to get involved and get engaged.
Couple definition questions I had. So number one, how do we classify a foster youth? Is that just someone who's in a foster program, or is that like somebody like a grandparent taking care of a child? Is that person considered a foster youth?
So on our form, it asks if they are placed in a home with someone and they're identified as a foster youth, not just living with the grandmother, because you can be living with your grandmother and not be foster.
Okay.
So these kids are foster or homeless as identified by the system, yeah.
Okay, okay. And then I think you mentioned this in your presentation, but I was not very familiar with it. Kagan strategies?
Yes, those are great collaborative strategies. And so we love the Kagan strategies. Those are fun. So they did the Kagan strategies at Royal Oaks and Beardsley are in year 3. They did it 2 years. They did year 1, year 2, and then Maxwell and Valley View are now in their 2nd year. And so it's just different collaborative strategies that they can use to work with students. And you guys want to talk a little bit more about how you use them and you see them across the board. There's some great ideas on how you can level kids and place them in groups, and different ways the teachers can indicate who those students are, so you know what types of questions to ask them, what type of ways to engage them in the learning. One of the things that's beautiful about the Kagan strategies is you start by focusing on something that is non-academic, so that all kids can kind of access those particular strategies. They'll feel comfortable engaging in the discourse and the dialogue that's taking place. So it may be like, you know, the water. Toss the water ball, or how high can you toss the water bottle? Toss it to the left, toss it to the right. Talk about that piece. They did an activity with balloons where you had 4 groups of kids in a group, or it was actually adults, and they threw one balloon in. You had to keep the balloon in the air, so they had to work together. And then you threw a second balloon in there. So we should do that. That would be fun. They threw that in there, so then they had to keep that balloon in the air, but they had to work together as a team. So it helps to kind of build that camaraderie, so the students know they have to work together before you get into those complex concepts in mathematics or science or history, et cetera. So if you guys want to add to it, I think that if not, we're good to go.
The focus is on collaboration, so requiring them to collaborate. All the structures require multiple students to be, and then the other piece is the engagement. So rather than, for example, calling like Mr. Reyes, Dr. Hasso, one at a time, the structure is provided so all students are actively engaged. Sometimes it's 100%, but the lowest that they ask for, they're in teams of 4 generally, and the lowest would be 25% of your class engaged in answering at one point. So high levels of engagement, high levels of collaboration, and then a lot of the structures allow for you to differentiate without having to think about it. So in the group of 4, you know where your English learners, for example, are sitting. So instead of having to be like, okay, I'm gonna ask, I can say every 2, stand up, here we go with your structure, and give them. And so there's a structure to even setting up the collaborative group, but focus on collaboration and engagement.
Great, thank you very much. No, please, Miss.
I was just going to add that with the cooperative structures, the focus initially, as Dr. Lawson was talking about, is a lot of those engagement strategies, but it's focusing on community building within your classroom. And then it narrows it down to team building within their team. And ultimately, you're giving students roles and responsibilities so that when they are engaging, it's purposeful conversation. That student discourse is guided in that they know what they're supposed to be doing. They know, like if you did inside circle, outside circle example, kids are with their partner. You have kids, partner A is on the inside, partner B is on the outside. They're facing each other, and it could be okay. You're going to take, before you go back and do your independent practice for your math problem, partner A, tell your partner B how you're solving this problem. They're teaching them. Okay, switch. Now partner B tells partner A. It gives students that opportunity, purposeful conversation. They have roles, they have responsibilities, they are engaged. And I watched it in a classroom where a teacher was not as comfortable with it, tried it for the first time in a formal observation, and kids walked away from that engagement, that cooperative structure. Literally the statements were, oh my gosh, this is going to be so easy, I've got this. Because they had the opportunity with a structure to practice how they were going to do the work. But that community and team building within a classroom provides a safe environment where they are safe to learn, safe to ask questions, safe to give their feedback and their thinking. So it's amazing all around. And ultimately, that student discourse just enhances their ability to learn. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? I didn't want to speak over anyone. And so do our teachers get formal training in this? Okay, all right. That's all. I mean, it sounds amazing. So it's.
Yeah, the two schools, when they went first, Royal Oaks and Beardsley, had 2 years. So that was 2 full days of each year of Kagan training. And then Maxwell and Valley View just did it over last year and this year. We did it's ultimately 4 full days of training.
Great. All right, so then this is more of a higher level question, maybe for you, Dr. Lawson. So you mentioned that this report comes out in December, and it is going back and looking at data that were collected in the spring, and then it finally gets a deep dive now in February. I mean, do we find that these data are still relevant, given that they were sort of collected almost a year ago? And do we have other methods to sort of attack the problems before having to wait this long?
Yeah, so it's trailing data. So they would kind of define it as that. But absolutely. So when we get the data in the beginning of the year, our administrators do look at the information. So we are having a study session in February, but it is linked to our CAS data. So when the CAS data came out, the site administrators were able to look at that data and take a deep dive into where students scored proficient, non-proficient, exceeding the standard, et cetera. So that's how we get the academic data here. So there's not a lot of gaps in the time when they analyze the data. But we also use our Renaissance STAR assessment data, and we do that at the beginning of the year. We do it every 6 to 8 weeks, and so that gives us data on our reading and on our math. And so we use that data to drive instruction. We use that data to meet and talk as a leadership team to look at where our strengths are, where the areas of growth are. It gives us one of the reports that we can look at tells you where students are in terms of meeting the standards for the classroom, so you can look at the pacing and where your students are. If they continue at the same progress, will they meet standards at the end of the year? If not, what do we need to do? There's data, it's kind of like a stoplight data, so we can look at that data vertically. If it's up and down and say it's red, up and down, that's an indication that we need to make an adjustment with instruction. If it's, this is vertically. Horizontal data tells us, oh, this particular student is struggling with these particular standards. So we do have some data points where we check every 6 to 8 weeks to see where our students are. That's one measure that we use. Teachers also use their teacher-created assessments. They use IXL at some of the sites, so they use their diagnostic assessment data. We use assessments for my math. So yeah, we have different data points that we're collecting. And we don't only just look at the academic piece, though. I think that it's also important to know, because we look at, we'd have to look at, behavior, how well are kids being successful in the classroom? Are there things that are hindering their ability to learn? They're having meetings at the sites where they do student study teams and the RTI and our MTSS, so we can look at where our students are, how can we support them early on, what are the red flags, so that we can meet the needs of those students early on. We don't want to wait till the last minute. We don't want to wait until we get this data. But this data does say all those things that we were doing throughout the year, did it make a difference or not? And then that's where we can then go in and make adjustments. In these areas where we see significant increases, we can say, yeah, those strategies that we were using for math in this area, those made a difference. Oh, we don't see any gains in our reading. Perhaps we need to go back and adjust some of our strategies and practices that we're using. Yeah.
Great, thank you. It sounds like we do have a lot of ways to get more real-time data, so that's excellent. So one, I guess, overarching question that I have in looking at the California dashboard in general is, I think the vast majority of people, if they do go and look at the dashboard, are going to land on that page and are going to see those initial little meters, right? And their initial thought is going to be, the school or the district I want my kid to go to, I want them to all be blue, all of them, right? And they're going to look and go, oh my gosh, they're not blue. And I think you've eloquently described that you got to dig a little bit deeper and see increases and the progress that we as a district are making and that students are making. So I guess my question is, for people that we encounter in the community on a day-to-day basis that we don't have coming up on an hour and a half of time to spend talking to them about, like, hey, this is what all the data mean. How do we talk to them about this and say, hey, don't just look for it to be in the blue. There's a lot more there than just that.
I would say for them to look at the change data. So if they see that stop sign and it's on that signal and it's saying yellow, go deeper where you can click on the link and it'll take you deeper into the subgroup data to get more details about what that color actually represents. So if I'm looking at a school district and I see that it's all blue, I mean, that would be like spectacular. But that doesn't mean that every student is scoring 100% proficient on every single assessment. So you're looking at the change. So if every year we're increasing and gaining every year, we're making growth. And as you see on that one grid where you say, like, this year was significant and the following year we make significant, we're going to keep moving. The color's going to keep changing. And so you can hit blue and it doesn't necessarily mean that every student, I guess, the entire district is proficient. So I would say, look at the lever, go deeper and look at the details and look at growth. Is this district making a difference where students are improving? Are they increasing every year, or are they declining? And are they just maintaining? Because you can be green and just maintain, and for example, in a school site, you can have different levels of students, right? And you can have students that come in green and they just continue to maintain and they don't change. So we also want to accelerate that as well, right? And so how do you look at, are we continuing to move our students forward? So dig deeper into the data, dig deep into the subgroup data to see, if I put my child in this school district and my student is an English learner, can they achieve? If my student is a student who's an African-American student, can they achieve in this district? If my student is a student that is a reclassified student, can they achieve in this district? What does their data say? And if that data says, yes, those students are increasing, they are making gains, then yes, this is a place for them. So we can't just go looking at a color, that one page that doesn't give any more information, doesn't help them. So always encourage them to dig deeper and look to see if they see change from the prior year to the current year. And also on the dashboard, there's another, you can go a little bit deeper and you can look at 4 years. So you can see more. So they need to, do their research, go deeper and just track it to see, are kids moving?
All right, so click around. Okay.
Can I add one thing too, just because I had this conversation with a parent? It's important to know that you can be you can be yellow up from orange, but you can also be yellow because you're down from green. And so really the color isn't what's important, it's how you got to the color that matters. And you have to click to go deeper to determine if you went up to yellow or down to yellow.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for making that distinction. I appreciate it. I think this is my last question. Chronic absenteeism. We were at almost a quarter of the students. I think it was 23.5%. That seems like a lot to me, but I don't know historically what it has been. And if I remember correctly, is that 10% or 10 days or more? I remember.
I believe it's one.
I feel like there was a 10 in there somewhere. 10%. So they've
18
been absent for
days.
10 more or 18 days because it's 180
That's
days.
been a
Right?
stubborn, I'll just
Go
jump
ahead,
in.
yeah, because
Okay.
Sorry, because I just have this in my head. Prior to COVID, we were in single digits for chronic
Okay.
absenteeism. COVID, I'm not going to make that an excuse, but it's a statewide issue, nationwide issue. It was in the 30s. I think we were probably as high as 35% at one point, a couple years back. So we're seeing gains.
Okay.
We're seeing improvements, but it's something that we're still continuing to work at.
Yeah. And I mean, are we on par with other districts in the state? I mean, they're also seeing numbers
Yes.
this high? Okay.
Yes. This is a trend. Unfortunately, it is a trend across.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you.
On that same note, kind of going back to the idea of having reading incentives, are there attendance incentives in place to incentivize students to come? I see heads nodding, so yeah, okay.
And our sites have attendance meetings as well. So many times there are other factors that need to be done on an individual basis. I know that principals do a lot of that outreach, working with families who may have maybe some trends that way. And then we also know that when students are ill, they shouldn't be in school either. So there's that balance we have to be sensitive to.
I was just thinking back to, perfect attendance, like that's kind of not quite the goal, right? So.
All right, board, any more questions or comments?
I just have, Mr. President, I just have a comment to make. Last Friday, I went to visit school. And I got into one of the classrooms, and I was talking to one teacher and the principal. And I hear the kids playing and laughing outside. The entire school was about the size of this room where we are right now. The entire school. But I hear the kids playing and happy, and I thought, why can these kids be so happy in here? And so I asked the principal, how can we help? And she said, first, we need water to improve our bathroom. Second, they need like a basketball playground to play. And I thought, but the kids are playing basketball outside. And they were playing any sport they want is playing. So, but I keep myself quiet when I went outside, back again it was just, this part was the classrooms, and this area was the playground. When I went outside, these kids were so happy playing basketball. The basketball ring, how do you call that? The hoop was a plastic hula hoop tied with cord tied to 2 trees. And they were happy playing basketball. And she said, you don't see that many kids playing in here because some of them are working with their parents picking coffee. The kids want to be at school every day because they don't want to be doing that all their life in the future. I can tell you, there is no other country better to this country where we live. There is no other, and I would say it because it's my own school district, there is no other better staff than what is here tonight. Thank you, all of you, for making the difference in these students' lives and parents that they don't want to see their kids going through what they do. They want a better life for the kids. I just can tell you, I am very, very pleased and blessed to be part of this big family. Do we disagree among brothers and sisters? Yes, we do. Even we disagree with our parents, but we know we are in a better place. So thank you to all of you for tonight. Yeah.
I said, that school that you spoke about that did not have the basketball court and the hoop, it was when you guys went and visited Ecuador, right?
Guatemala.
Guatemala.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make one final comment. I know it's getting late, but I just want to acknowledge and celebrate your collective efforts when we look at, EL progress at DHS being celebrated. That is, the collective work of those kids who, have journeyed through our elementary and middle school programs, and looking at the improvement in graduation rates. Again, those students have navigated a K-9, 10, 11, 12, well, 12, right? If we're looking at graduation rates. And so just want to applaud your collective efforts. And, together we're getting kids to where we want them to be, which is 12th grade. We want them to leave with a high school diploma. So thank you. And thank you for everything that you presented tonight. It was really helpful.
Just want to say thank you as well, and I think it's important to get our parents and families engaged with our kids, especially the English learners. And I think if we involve them, they'll be more confident and they'll be able to help their kids with their homework or whatever needs to. So look forward to that and going to the first day that you guys do that. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Lawson, you did great.
All right. Yes, thank you very much. Very, very informative. I think I think everyone on the board learned a lot, Dr. Lawson, from your presentation and the discussion that you helped to foster here. So I think, Dr. Hillman, that's everything. So if there's no other questions or comments, then I believe we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we will be adjourning this meeting in memory of Laura Caparone. I hope I'm saying that right. That is the mother of Grace Reyes. So we'll adjourning in her memory. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion by Board Member Diaz, second by Board Member Holguin. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, board. Thank you, everybody.